Yesterday's prophecies, today's headlines. This is the Hal Lindsey Report. And now, Hal Lindsey.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hal Lindsey Report. One of the signs given by Jesus as a signal of his soon return is recorded in Matthew chapter 24, verse 12. He says, "Because lawlessness shall abound, the love of many will grow cold." In April 2009, President Barack Obama visited Mexico, where he made headlines by blaming Americans for Mexican drug violence. He said, "This war is being waged with guns purchased not here, but in the United States. More than 90% of the guns recovered in Mexico come from the United States, many from gun shops that lay on our shared border." This figure was later proven to be a gross exaggeration, but around that same time, American guns being used by Mexican drug runners became an administration talking point. It was used by everybody from the Secretary of State to the ambassador to Mexico. An April 2009 article in PolitiFact declared that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, or ATF, strongly supported that statistic. It suggested that lax U.S. gun laws were responsible for Mexican drug crime. That was almost 3 years ago. This past week, the Congressional House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform held hearings on a Department of Justice program called Operation Fast and Furious. The committee chairman, Representative Darrell Issa, was stonewalled throughout the entire investigation by the administration and, in particular, by Attorney General Eric Holder. When the committee released its report, we found out why. It seems that over roughly a 3-year period, ATF agents have been pressuring U.S. gun dealers, mostly along the Arizona-Mexico border, to sell thousands of semi-automatic weapons to straw buyers, in this case, Mexican nationals. A straw buyer is someone who pretends to be a legitimate purchaser of an item, but who is really purchasing it on behalf of someone else. And usually, it's because the someone else is unqualified or legally prohibited from buying it himself. In this case, the straw buyers purchased these weapons on behalf of Mexican nationals involved in the drug trade. It now appears that the ATF allowed those guns to be smuggled into Mexico in order to inflate the number of U.S. guns later seized in Mexico. The Mexican government was kept in the dark about this operation. At least one ATF agent was threatened with termination after he raised questions about the operation's legality. Senior ATF personnel, including Acting Director Ken Melson, and senior Department of Justice officials were well aware of and supported the operation. More than 2,000 weapons were allowed into Mexico by the ATF. That's enough to arm 10 infantry companies or 2 full battalions of drug dealers. They're believed to have been used to shoot an estimated 150 Mexican law enforcement officials and known to have killed at least 1 U.S. Border Patrol officer. The ISA panel makes it clear that Operation Fast and Furious was well known and approved at the highest levels of the ATF and the DOJ. That makes it inconceivable that it wasn't supported by the Attorney General himself. The operation actually began in 2005 as an undercover sting operation. It was intended to catch the straw buyers in the act of purchasing guns for the drug cartels. Sometime in 2009, it morphed into what it is today. The White House has clearly been using Operation Fast and Furious to support its efforts to sway public opinion. The fact that it has cost hundreds of lives is only now coming to light. A Congressional Oversight Committee alleging that the Justice Department and the nation's top law enforcement official was involved in selling guns to drug lords in order to influence public opinion on gun control. Now that sounds like a pretty vivid example of the description Jesus gave for the last days, because lawlessness abounds. What Americans call the Pledge of Allegiance is, in fact, a loyalty oath to the Republic and the flag. The pledge was composed in 1892 and was formally adopted by Congress in 1942. To distinguish America from the atheistic communists during the Cold War, in 1954, Congress voted to add the words, "under God," to the pledge. Congressional sessions began with the members of Congress reciting the pledge. So do public school days, local government meetings, the Boy Scouts, Lions clubs, Rotary clubs, and many sporting events. According to the U.S. Flag Code, the pledge should be rendered by standing at attention, facing the flag with the right hand over the heart. Military veterans in and out of uniform may render a military salute. The Pledge of Allegiance reads, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." Because America's founding was based in dissent and First Amendment guarantees freedom of speech, reciting the pledge is voluntary. Nobody can be compelled to pledge allegiance to the United States. However, the U.S. Court of Appeals affirmed that the inclusion of the words "under God" does not amount to an unconstitutional endorsement of religion. In 2002, Congress amended the Flag Code to include as a congressional finding Thomas Jefferson's 1781 observation that God who gave us life gave us liberty, and can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are the gift of God, that they are not to be violated but with his wrath. Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that his justice cannot sleep forever. So it would seem that Congress still agrees with Jefferson enough to quote him as a congressional finding about the pledge. Our rights are granted by God and not by the government. Over the weekend, NBC opened its coverage of the final round of the 2011 U.S. Open golf tournament with an artistic montage. It included school children reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. When it came to the part where the children pledge, "under God, indivisible," NBC edited that part out. And it wasn't an accident. The network had one of its commentators read a statement that tried to make it sound accidental. Regrettably, a portion of the Pledge of Allegiance that was in that feature was edited out. It was not done to upset anyone, and we'd like to apologize to those of you who were offended by it. NBC executives still couldn't bring themselves to say the words "under God," not even in their apology. The network only admitted to editing out a portion of the pledge. The executives apologized for omitting "under God" by omitting "under God" in their apology. They couldn't even claim to have accidentally cut off the end of the pledge because the phrase that followed it, "with liberty and justice for all," was left intact. And they did it not just once, but twice. NBC executives later admitted to making a mistake. But the mistake was not in omitting the words that apparently offended them, "under God, indivisible." The mistake was that they got caught and they miscalculated the public's reaction. In his letter to Timothy, the Apostle Paul wrote, "For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. And they shall turn away their ears from the truth and shall be turned into fables." Lies are never free. There's always a price attached. Americans have, up until recent years, enjoyed the unique freedoms guaranteed by a constitutional republic under God. The lie now being widely perpetrated is that America was not founded as a Christian nation. The price tag that comes with that lie is enormous. Our founders specifically declared that America's rights and freedoms are granted by God. If God is a myth, then so are our rights. Remove the words "under God, indivisible" from the pledge, and all that is left is one nation divisible with liberty and justice for some. I'll be back after this break. In addition to warning of false Christs and false prophets in the last days, Jesus also warned that the days before his return would be accompanied by unusual cosmic events. He said, "And there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things that are coming on the earth. For the powers of the heavens shall be shaken." What may well be the science story of the century broke last week. Heavyweight U.S. astrophysicists announced that the sun appears headed into a lengthy spell of minimal solar activity. Only a few months ago, astronomers forecast an unusually powerful solar maximum would peak sometime around the end of 2012 or early 2013. Between now and then, powerful solar storms would wreak havoc on the Earth's orbiting communication satellites. But the biggest fear was that a direct hit from a solar flare would create an EMP, that's an electromagnetic pulse, that could theoretically fry the U.S. electrical grid. A solar storm on June 7th was so powerful that had it hit the Earth head-on, it could have fried the global electrical grid. There are approximately 340-ton generators on the grid in the United States that are deemed to be at risk. Currently, it takes a year just to build and replace one of them. A worst-case scenario estimates that a direct hit on the grid by a solar flare could knock out power to as many as 100 million people for as long as 4 or 5 years. Dr. David Hathaway of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center says that since the space age began in the 1950s, solar activity has been generally high. 5 of the 10 most intense solar cycles on record have occurred in the last 50 years. Apparently, all that is about to change. The American Astronomical Society dropped a bombshell this week at its annual meeting at New Mexico State University in Las Cruces, New Mexico. The result of 3 separate studies seem to show that even as the current sunspot cycle swells toward the solar maximum, the sun could be heading into a more dormant period. That means that activity during the next 11-year sunspot cycle would be greatly reduced or even eliminated. How dormant? The Las Cruces announcement referred to the Maunder minimum. Beginning in 1645, sunspot activity weakened and then practically ceased completely for almost 100 years. The coldest winter in 500 years was known in England as the Great Frost of 1709. The year without a summer occurred in 1816. Sunspot activity dropped to near zero in 2007. That was just about the same time that Al Gore learned just how inconvenient the truth can be. When the sun is active, the solar system, including Earth, gets warmer. When the sun is inactive, it gets cooler. It's an inconvenient truth for global warming enthusiasts, but truth nonetheless. In summary, then, the Earth is due for a massive strike from a solar flare sometime in the next 2 years, followed by a collapse of solar activity that portends a period of intense global cooling. The world's scientists are so confused that the consensus opinion on global warming and solar activity is that there is no consensus opinion. However, they're so alarmed that they insist on doing something even if we don't know what effect that something might have. All they know for certain is that things are getting pretty scary out there in outer space, and that it's coming our way. And that is exactly what Jesus predicted. He described men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. For the world, this is frightening news. But for those who know the Lord, this is confirmation of our faith in his promise that he is coming soon. For Luke records him as saying just 2 verses later, when these things begin to come to pass, then look up, and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. There's a new heresy making the rounds of Western Christianity under the name Chrislam. Chrislam describes a new religion invented in, of all places, Lagos, Nigeria. Chrislam is an effort to combine the tenets of Christianity with the tenets of Islam. One internet encyclopedia says Chrislam uses the Bible and the Quran and views them as equally holy texts. Chrislam claims that Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad were all prophets. Right off the bat, it finds itself with an insurmountable problem. Jesus didn't claim to be just a prophet. He claimed to be the Son of God. When Jesus was on trial before Israel's high priest, he was asked under oath, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus answered, "I am. And you shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven." He was condemned to death for blasphemy because of that confession. Jesus even claimed to be the fulfillment of Daniel's great prophecy that God would come on the clouds of heaven to judge the world. Yet the Quran only calls Jesus Isa, the son of Maryam. The Quran flatly denies that God ever had a son, and say all praise is due to Allah, who has not taken a son and who has not a partner in the kingdom, and who is not a helper to save him from disgrace, and proclaim his greatness, magnifying him. If Jesus was not the Son of God, then he was a liar, which disqualifies him as a prophet of God. Moreover, he went to the cross based on that lie, making him not only a liar, but also a lunatic. A liar and a lunatic cannot be a good person and a true prophet. Christ's claims never left us the option of saying that he was only a good man, a teacher, and a prophet. Then there is the great problem that Islam does not teach the need for a sacrifice to die in our place as the atonement for our sins. Now, this is the heart of the biblical message from the Old Testament to Jesus. A spotless lamb, for instance, was killed as a substitute cover for Israel's sin on the Passover. And when John the Baptist saw Jesus coming to him, he proclaimed, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." All the sacrifices of the Old Testament proclaimed the ultimate coming of the one who would not just temporarily cover sin, but take it away as a barrier to the believer being received into a personal relationship with God. The Quran denies Jesus' crucifixion as atonement for sin and also his resurrection. And they're saying, surely we have killed the Messiah, Isa, son of Maryam, the apostle of Allah, and they did not kill him, nor did they crucify him. But it appeared to them so, like Isa, and most surely those who differ therein are only in doubt about it. They have no knowledge respecting it, but only follow a conjecture, and they killed him not for sure. Nay, Allah took him up to himself, and Allah is mighty and wise. Now, in that Quranic quote, it's clear that Allah, is in their claim, did not resurrect him. He just took him directly into heaven without dying. There is no provision of blood atonement for sin taught by Islam. And this is no minor issue. This is the heart of what the Bible teaches. Either the Quran is telling the truth or the Bible is telling the truth. They cannot both be right. Chrislam's version is that Jesus was a good man, a wise teacher, and a prophet. But if that is all that Jesus Christ is, he cannot be a good man and a true prophet. He claimed to be the very things that the Quran flatly says are not true. So that means that Jesus must be a liar or a lunatic. If Jesus is not the Son of God and did not die on the cross for the sin of mankind before being raised alive on the third day, then the very foundational truths of Christianity are a lie. So right off the bat, there are irreconcilable differences within the concept of Chrislam. Islam was born as an attempt to co-opt Christianity and Judaism to create a new religion. The Muslim Jesus, or Isa, invented 600 years after the crucifixion, bears absolutely no resemblance to the Jesus Christ of the Bible. It is a central tenet of Islam that Muhammad taught that when Isa returns, he will break the cross, kill pigs, and abolish the poll tax. Now, what does it mean, break the cross? The cross is the symbol of Christianity. Breaking the cross means the forceful abolishing of Christianity. Islam claims that is the role of Isa in the predicted judgment of the world in the last days. This is the extreme opposite of what the Bible teaches. The Quran teaches that Jesus will destroy the very Christians that he died to save. Isa, the Muslim Jesus, is venerated as a true Muslim whose role is to bring about the violent destruction of Christianity. Chrislam is not a combination of Islam and Christianity. It is ultimately an abolishment of Christianity in favor of Islam. The Isa of the Quran is a false Christ and a false prophet. According to the Bible, Chrislam is the very embodiment and fulfillment of the real Jesus Christ prophecy concerning the time of his second coming. When asked by his disciples about the time of his coming and the end of the world, the very first thing he said was, "Take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and shall deceive many." Later he repeats the warning, telling his disciples, "Then if anyone says to you, 'Look, here is the Christ,' or 'There,' do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if it were possible, even the elect." Chrislam has two major flaws. The first is that because of their doctrine, no Muslim can ever give in to Christian thinking. He could be killed for it. The second flaw is that because of Christ's teachings, no true Christian could ever give in to Muslim thinking. So in the final analysis, Chrislam is the product of some misguided Christians who believe that they can somehow combine Islam and Christianity and produce something that is still true to the fundamental teachings of both. It cannot be done. And the naivete of these Christians, many leaders, is that they can't see that the Muslims will always win in such attempts at merging. Muslims are inflexible on their doctrines, just as true Christians are. But Christians will seek to be gentle and convinced by polite arguments. Muslims believe in conversion by force, on the other hand. They cannot accept any challenge to the Quran's authenticity and will often get violent about it. Yet some foolish Christians think that they can blend their faith with that of Islam and still remain intact, effective, and biblical. It will not, cannot happen. Inviting Muslims as a group into our churches is a no-win situation. Now, Christians should certainly be kind and seek Muslims who are open to the claims of Christ. But unless they are open, it's a waste of time to try and convince them. And you will rarely find Muslims in a group open to the gospel. The peer pressure alone would keep them away. The great danger of Chrislam to the Christians is that it encourages them to compromise the basics of our faith in order to get Muslims to join in with our churches. and that will never be acceptable to our Lord Jesus Christ. We cannot compromise the essentials of the gospel and still have any cause worth pursuing. Just remember this command from the Quran. And the Jews say, Uzair is the son of Allah. And the Christians say, the Messiah is the son of Allah. These are the words of their mouths. They imitate the sayings of those who disbelieved before. May Allah destroy them, how they are turned away. This verse commands the Muslims to call down destruction upon Christians for believing and teaching that Jesus, the Messiah, is the Son of Allah, or God. You do not want that sentiment in your church, do you? Well, that's it for tonight, folks. I pray that you will take seriously what we talked about tonight. It's very important. God bless you, and God willing, I'll see you next week.
You've been watching the Hal Lindsey Report. To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470470, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74147. You can also support this ministry online. Visit HalLindsey.com or call 1-888-RAPTURE.